G'day and welcome to Beyond Sobriety, a podcast where you'll hear real stories of recovery and resilience come to life. I'm Michael and I'm an alcoholic, your host and fellow journeyer on the road to sobriety. As someone who has walked the path of addiction and found solace in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I understand the challenges and triumphs that come with striving for sobriety. And it's with this understanding and empathy that we've created this podcast. Our purpose here at Beyond Sobriety is simple yet profound: to provide a platform where individuals can share their experience with alcoholism openly and authentically. Through candid conversation, personal narrative, and expert insights, we aim to inspire hope, foster understanding, and offer a beacon of light to those still navigating the shadows of addiction. We'd love for you to be a part of this growing community. If you find value in the stories that you hear today, please consider liking and leaving a comment and sharing this episode with somebody who might benefit from hearing it. Your support will help spread the message of hope and resilience to more people who need it. I'm Michael and I'm an alcoholic, and this is Beyond Sobriety. So we're here with Maz. Maz, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Maz Compton. I am 44 years old. I have not had a drink for the last 10 years of my life, and I'm a radio broadcaster, and I have authored a book called Last Drinks, which details my reasons for giving up alcohol and how I've managed to stay that course. I've also hosted a podcast of the same name, and I recently did an audio series called Booze Break, which is kind of a kickstart for anyone who wants to go a month or so without alcohol in their lives. So I've done a few things in the sobriety space in my time.
How would you describe the attitude towards alcohol in your family when you were growing up?
It wasn't really around. My parents were highly religious. I guess my first exposure to alcohol was like communion at church when we had quote unquote wine, even though it wasn't wine, but there was talk of wine. And my parents weren't big party animals. I think they dabbled in a bit of wine with friends, but I wasn't around alcohol at all really in my home life. It was at 15 years old, the peer pressure in school. That was my kind of first introduction to alcohol. And I think what sort of got me excited about alcohol was everyone talking about drinking when I was 15 and a teenager, and it sounded cool.
Well, it's a forbidden fruit, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think it was the fact that like we weren't meant to do it, and our parents had said not to do it, and our teachers said don't drink, and everyone said don't drink. So we're like, well, we're going to go and drink.
It's like the first thing that you do. Like those signs on those shows, don't try this at home. The first thing you want to do.
You want to go and try it at home.
No, absolutely. So when did you first, you said you were about 15. So, most people have said that when they were young, first at parties or around friends with peer pressure. Did you find that you had a problem right from the word go?
No, my first drinking experience was not pleasant at all. I ended up being carried out of a party and taken to a friend's house to sober up before my friend's mum called my mum to come and get me. So it was pretty embarrassing, very humiliating. I vomited on my friend Richard. Like it was just a terrible, terrible experience. Yet still, about 2 or 3 weeks later, when one of the girls from school had a party and we all were there, I was drinking again. So I think the binge drinking thing when I was a teenager was just because everyone else was doing it. And I don't think it was problematic at all. It was problematic in the sense that it probably wasn't great and I was hiding it from my parents, and I knew it wasn't a good thing to do, but everyone was doing it, so it felt fine.
Yeah.
I didn't really feel like I had a drinking problem until I was in my 30s, to be honest. I thought the way that I conducted myself around booze in my teenage years felt normal because I wasn't more or less than anyone else, if that makes sense. I wasn't drinking much more or much less than anyone that I was around, so it didn't feel out of place or out of hand. And that definitely transpired into my adult life when I started working in television and radio. It was around me everywhere and everyone was doing it. So again, I felt like I'm within the slipstream here of what everyone is doing. So it feels normal. So I had no reason to think that it was problematic for me until it got to a point where I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, and I don't know how to conduct myself in society without alcohol.
Yeah.
And that took years and years to get to that point.
No, absolutely. Where did you grow up?
So I was born in England and I moved to Australia when I was 8 years old, and I grew up on the northern beaches of Sydney.
Oh, wow. I wouldn't have picked England. You don't have any trace of an accent.
I do not, because I lost it, I think, the week I arrived here because I was 8 years old.
Very young.
And when you're a kid, they say, I think there's a certain age where you keep your accent if you move to a different country, and it's like mid-teens.
Okay.
And I was 8, so it went out the window.
So you said when you were young, it started off just as the party scene and things like that. What about when you first started your working career in your early 20s?
Yeah, same thing. Like my first real kind of full-time job was working public relations, and my job was literally to schmooze people. That was my gig. So my job was to like go and get champagne for the clients who were paying tons of money for this PR campaign. And so again, I was around it constantly. Part of my job was organizing parties. It was a great job. And so with that comes free alcohol all the time. And so you just do find yourself drinking a lot. But again, it felt normal because everyone at work we weren't drinking at our desks by any means, but like, you know, at 5:30, somebody would bring a trolley around with beers and whatever, and we'd all just have a drink on a Friday afternoon. And again, felt very, very normal. And the same with the friends that I was sort of keeping up with outside of my work colleagues. We would go out drinking on the weekends, and, you know, we all kind of stayed safe. Nothing crazy or dramatic ever happened. It was just the way we kind of went about our lives in our mid-20s. And there weren't any real signs where I thought, oh, this is maybe not how I should be conducting my life, because I didn't know any other way to live, and I didn't know anyone my age that wasn't doing what we were doing.
Yeah. You were drinking like everybody else, and it wasn't really a problem for you at that point. Is that how you would describe it?
Yes.
So what point do you think it became something that you were really concerned about, or you felt like it was unhealthy?
So in my 30s, I started to find myself around alcohol and not wanting to drink. And that was the first time that I questioned my relationship with alcohol. So it would be a situation like there'd be a party on the weekend, like a friend celebrating a birthday. And I would think, geez, I don't actually want to go because I don't want to drink.
Yeah.
And those sorts of thoughts for me were really confusing, because I was like, why can't I just go to the party and not drink? That was not on the table. So that was not even something that I could consider getting through at that point in my life. And that was when I started to go, this is not good now, because I don't know how to conduct myself in public, around friends, socially, without alcohol. And so that doesn't feel right. And also there was this underlying tone of, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be hungover anymore. I don't want to go out anymore. But I don't know what else to do. And so I didn't want to sit in my apartment by myself. And so I just kind of kept on going out and drinking. But that around my mid-30s was when I really started to start questioning those choices and I guess trying to seek out, like, how do I get out of this drinking hamster wheel that I'm on? Like, I'm on the treadmill and I have no idea how to get off. But I really desperately want to get off now. It wasn't enjoyable anymore.
Yeah. So when you were doing this, did you drink to excess every single time? Or was it just you just wanted to go out and experience it without the alcohol?
It would just depend. I mean, it got to a point where in my 30s, definitely when I went out drinking, like out with friends, like I would put myself in a taxi at like 12, knowing if I stayed out any later, it would end up being pretty debaucherous, or I wouldn't remember what would happen. And that terrified me a little bit when I had a few, I guess, quote unquote, blackout moments where I would get home the next day and not realize how I got home or what time I got in or that kind of thing. When those things started happening, that's when it became a little bit scary. And so I kind of had this little like protection mechanism for myself where I'd be like, okay, at 12 o'clock, I'm going to tap out, because then it's not going to escalate and go totally wild, and I'll be able to manage the next day and still kind of enjoy like the rest of the weekend or whatever. Yeah. Or if I wasn't going out, I was just staying at home, I would just have a couple of glasses of wine by myself. That wasn't excessive, but that also wasn't, I look back on that now and realize that that wasn't healthy either. It's
kind of like the Cinderella story, you know, at 12 o'clock you had to get out of there otherwise.
Yeah, I did turn into a pumpkin. I turned into a bit of a dickhead. So I was like, time to get home.
You know, it's funny you mentioned the blackouts. I'll probably do blackout drinking before I got sober at least 3 or 4 times a week.
Okay.
There would have been days where it was what happened last night, or you repeat the same conversation with somebody and they go, oh, we spoke about this and you said the exact same thing. You're like, oh crap. And then you just kind of smile and go, oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, I was just mucking around or joking about it.
Yes.
Did you find yourself making excuses for your drinking or things that happened while you're drunk?
Not really, because everyone that I was with was, again, like I've said, in the same boat. Like my behavior wasn't out of character at all. My behavior was very much accepted.
Yes.
So we were all kind of riffing on each other on a Monday morning at work, because it's like, oh, did you see so-and-so? And I, for the most part, was not outrageous. Like my biggest fault when I was drunk was that I was the happiest person in the room. And so everyone always wanted to invite me places because I just brought so much joy and fun. Like I was a very happy, joyful, like I never became aggressive or violent or anything like that. So again, I think because I was so much fun and like, my biggest, I think, fault was dancing on tables at a bar and probably getting into a little bit of trouble from it. Other than that, I wasn't breaking any laws. I wasn't, driving home or doing anything that felt really unsafe or really dangerous. It was I just was the fun stuff. And so again, because it was just always pretty much fun and then I felt rotten the next day, it was like, oh, well, that's what everyone's doing and I had a good time, I guess. So we'll just carry on. So no one called me out. There was no intervention. There wasn't an incident where I was like, oh, I've crossed the line here. So again, it was really hard to kind of land on the honest conversation with myself, which was, this is no longer serving me. That took a really long time to get to because I kind of got out of it. I got out of having that truth conversation because nothing really crazy ever did happen to me. And I think I'm just very, very lucky that nothing did.
It's definitely a slippery slope. Would you find that your work environment contributed to that?
100%.
As Australians, we have a very large drinking culture.
We do.
And my first job, I guess my first adult job in reality was in the Defence Force. So that's got a very high drinking culture as well. And so I actually didn't drink much at all in the Defence and I would have been one of the low drinkers, but it was seen almost as a badge of honour. Would you say it's a similar thing within the entertainment industry?
I don't know so much as a badge of honour, but just like a cultural norm. So I feel like when I first started working at MTV, we used to make this joke that like the pay was shit, but at least we got free drinks.
Yeah. And
that was so true. And not just free drinks. I mean, like we got bottles of Verve on tap. Like we got good stuff, We got the leftover rider that Jared Leto didn't have at the MTV Awards because it was just there. Like you just got paid, I suppose. Like that was one of the perks. It's like, well, the salary was okay. The job was phenomenal. And then you got like free alcohol every single afternoon if you wanted it. It was there. It was there for the taking. And it was kind of this like benefit that it wasn't in the contract at all, but it was in the culture.
Yes.
So it was definitely a cultural norm. And the parties at MTV were notorious for being outrageous and totally alcohol fueled and free and wild. And that was my working environment most weeks.
That would have been very hard.
Well, no, it was great. It wasn't hard because I wasn't trying to stop drinking.
Oh,
I was having the best time ever.
I understand.
But at the time, I didn't realize it was a problem. At the time, I was just having a good time and then managing the hangovers and making sure I didn't do anything to like jeopardize my job.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I managed to kind of really navigate that whole environment well. It was out the other side. And like years later when I had kept, like the job had gone, but the drinking had stayed.
Yes.
And I'd been through a couple of really big life events that I realized, okay, this is my only coping tool for any level of stress or any level of celebration in my life. And maybe I need to find some more different tools to manage some of the stresses that I've got going on right now.
So it sounds like you didn't really have a defining rock bottom moment or any particular low point. Would I be correct in that?
I really struggle with the idea of a rock bottom moment.
Yep.
I see it more as a line in the sand because I feel like you could have a rock bottom, but then you could dig the dirt out of the bottom and keep full. You know what I mean? Like your rock bottom can be 100%. Like 3 levels below the rock bottom if you are really in a tough space.
Yeah.
So, and everyone's rock bottom, quote unquote, is different because everything's relative. Like struggle is struggle.
Yes.
So my struggle doesn't look like someone else's, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't extremely difficult for me.
Yeah.
The moment that I guess I realized I wanted to change my drinking behavior was after a year in 2014 of constantly coming up with this, I don't want to drink anymore, but I don't know what else to do scenario. So I kept going out and I kept partaking in the social activities and I kept drinking, but I didn't want to do it anymore. And so then I had this really big disconnect internally, and I lived in conflict for that whole year of doing something that I didn't want to do, and also understanding that I'm a very smart person, but I felt like I was making very silly choices. And so that was confusing to me too.
Yeah.
And then also thinking, why don't I have the willpower to overcome this obstacle in my life? Because I am an overcomer and I've overcome such adversity. Why can't I summons up the willpower or the courage to knock this thing on the head? So there were all of these conflicts happening in my world. And then a really good friend of mine passed away suddenly in September of that year. And I went straight to a drink. And that was kind of the moment when I thought, okay, my only coping mechanism is alcohol. I need to find something else. Otherwise, I can't see my life turning out really great because this is not working anymore. It wasn't a rock bottom. It was a line in the sand where I decided I'm going to try and find some more coping tools in my life. And I think I'm going to try living my life for a little while without alcohol and seeing how that looks for me, because I think that might be a good fit.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you said that it took you about a year of struggling with this before you were able to put it down. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a year of sober curiosity where I was in that really conflicted space of, I don't want to do this behavior, but I keep doing this behavior. I don't want to do this. I keep doing it. That was, week to week to week to week to week. And then it was when my friend passed away. I think that anyone who's lost a friend or has dealt with some deep grief will know you do view the world a little bit differently after that. And I think that that was kind of the moment for me where I looked at things a little bit differently. And I was like, okay, how can I make a change in my world? Because I keep doing the same thing, but expecting a different Maz. So if I change the thing that I'm doing, I might get a different Maz. And I wasn't loving who I was right then.
Yeah. Did you find you had any fears attached to that?
About giving up?
Yeah.
Oh, 1,000. My number one fear was, what will people think of me? Because I've always been this person. So I'm going to change. Are people going to be okay with that? Are people going to reject that idea? Will I lose my friends? I was worried that I would lose my job because I thought I wouldn't be fun anymore. And a big part of my job at the time was to be fun on the radio. I was worried that I would die of boredom because I didn't know how to do things other than with a drink in my hand. So I had no exposure really to a social life that didn't revolve around alcohol. So I had no idea how I was going to fill my weekends or what I was going to do. So there were some really big, and those fears were the level of fear on those sort of hot ticket items for people who are thinking about giving up drinking are so big that it can actually stop you from moving forward. Those fears were so big and so overwhelming and so real that I was like, oh my God, I don't think I should do this. But I got to a point where I was like, I have to. Because I have to make a change now. If I don't make this change, I will never know what's on the other side of it. And I was excited to see what that would look like. So a lot of fear that probably kept me in that space for longer than the year, maybe even 3 or 4 or 5 years beforehand, I was having those thoughts. But then the idea of not drinking was way too overwhelming, too hard basket, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And then I think eventually I got to the point where I was like, okay, let's step into this new truth now and see what's on the other side of it.
Yeah, I felt the same way with that kind of paradoxical fear base where you sit there and you go, I'm petrified to keep on drinking, but I'm scared to death of what will happen if I stop.
Yeah, you're scared. You're actually you're scared both ways. You're like, I'm so scared to keep going because I don't know where it's going to go. And I'm so scared to go the other way because I don't know where that leads.
Yes.
But at some point you just have to kind of feel the fear and do it anyway, which is what I did. And I think I got to the point where I thought, if I lose all of my friends, but I don't have to keep up this facade, the peace I will find from that will be worth being lonely for. And that didn't happen anyway.
It's that social anxiety of going, I'm going to be ostracized, but it's a fear that you've made up in your head because
it's totally irrational.
It's crazy that you think this is how people are going to see me if I stop doing this, but you don't know that.
That's exactly it. And it's so interesting how people do or how people did respond to me. Some things I was not expecting, and then other things were really delightful and surprising.
I know some people call it a disease or whatever you want to label it as, but I think it's definitely a common trait where we manifest fears of a reality in our head which don't exist, which keep us trapped in the cycle to repeat our drinking behavior.
Yeah.
When you decided to stop drinking, was it just a overnight thing, like I'm going to stop and that was it? Or did you have a couple of days where it was like, I've got to pour this down the sink, the next day you're buying more, or what happened?
So I kind of made I'm a planner. So I made a plan and I thought I would just stop on the 1st of January. Okay. So that felt like a good day. And then I thought I can get through Christmas and that'll be fine. I had a holiday plan, so that was good. So I was like, January 1 seems like it was, I guess, a calculated plan to do the first 31 days of 2015 without alcohol and see how it goes. So I set myself up to do this experiment. I gave myself like a date and a time frame, and I'm very good with stuff like that. Like I know what works for me. So I set myself a challenge, which was, I think, a really healthy way to get me to tap into sobriety. And I didn't say I was never going to drink again because that would have been too overwhelming for me. So I just thought
scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, I'll just do 31 days and see how that see how that looks and feels. And so, it was more of just a practical thing. I was like, I don't want to stop right now. It's November and I'm not ready, but I can prepare myself to be ready for the 1st of January. And that felt like a nice, clean slate for a new year. And I was moving cities and all these things were happening. So I was like, that's a good day to do it. And that's what I decided. And then that was the day. And I literally haven't had a drink since that day.
I love that. It's just fantastic. You set yourself a goal and you stuck to it. I wasn't that strong.
Oh, I don't know if it's about strength though. So for me, I didn't say on January 1st, I'm never drinking again for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
All I did was I said on January 1st, I'm going to start the process of finding out who I am without alcohol in my life and see where that takes me. And if I got 2 or 3 months into that and then I thought, you know what, I'm good and I can still have a glass of wine on the weekend and I'm comfortable with that, that would have been fine too.
Yeah.
It just so happened that what I discovered on the other side of that last drink was something really great that I am still unpacking and exploring and growing with and learning to love. And it's a version of myself that I didn't expect to find. So it's, for me, like it hasn't been about strength, so to speak, because I haven't looked at it as a battle. But this is my story.
Yeah.
For others, it is a battle. But for me, it wasn't a battle. For me, it was a discovery and a self-exploration that I was willing to let go of something that I've become very accustomed to in order to embrace something unknown for me, which was a sober life and a hangover-free weekend. And I loved that so much that I was able to keep doing that quite easily against all odds, and even in the face of adversity and people giving me a bit of shit about it, I was able to keep going because I was so excited about the person I was uncovering and discovering and realizing existed away from all of the booze.
You found somebody that you enjoyed more after stopping drinking?
100%.
Do you think you're trying to cover anything up, any kind of pain? Were you trying to escape anything by drinking? Or like, because you've kind of mentioned it was more of just a social norm throughout your network. Do you think you were trying to hide from anything? Were you running away, coping?
So I think like what I can kind of articulate now is, and I didn't realize this about myself at the time, but I'm actually an introvert with an extroverted personality.
Yes.
So I think my whole adult life I thought I was an extrovert. And so I was always putting myself in these social situations where I had to be this big personality and this loud, fun person. And that's actually not my natural default. So in order to get there, I would have to like have a drink to even get out the door of my apartment because I didn't want to go and be that person. But I thought that's who I had to be and who I needed to be. I guess I just didn't have the self-knowledge to understand that actually doesn't serve me. That's just one part of what I do for my job is to be extroverted and to tap into these extroversion personality traits that I have. But my actual personality is to be introverted, which just means I need to be away from people in order to refuel, not with people. So people actually drain me, not refuel me, whereas my husband's the opposite. He is an extrovert, and so he gets fueled by being social. So that's kind of tricky for us to manage because I'm like, I don't want to go out anymore. I just want to go home or stay at home or just not be around people. And that refuels me. Like I just want to bake and do art journaling and just hang and or exercise or go on a bushwalk or not be around lots and lots of people. But I didn't know that about myself. So I think I would drink to like cope with the social anxiety that I was self-inflicting upon myself, which I didn't realize I was doing, number one. And then over the years, I went through some really significant life events that I didn't have the tools to cope with, that I then defaulted to drinking to mask pain and trauma as well. So it's sort of a layered approach as to how it probably got as deep as it got. So I think initially, no, not masking pain, not pretending to be someone else, just trying to like be who I thought I was supposed to be, but didn't realize I didn't have to be like that.
Yeah.
And then over time with significant life events, and adulting is tricky, it then became a pain mask, and it then became a way to just like dull down all the feelings because we don't want to feel the feelings because the feelings are too hard.
Yeah, definitely. Being an adult definitely sucks. There's no doubt about that. Look, you say you're an introvert, but obviously you've chosen a career which demands you to be, I guess, put on that facade of an extrovert.
Yeah.
So it sounds like to me that you realised that was pushing you more towards that coping mechanism because it's not your natural default position. Were you a daily drinker before then, or was it just most of the time?
Close to daily. Yeah, I would have a drink. Yeah, pretty much every day.
Okay, so then you stopped after New Year's. How were those first few days?
First few days were great because it was a novelty. So I was like, I'm not drinking. I did a thing. And so like after day one, I was like, oh, I've done a whole day of that new thing. And I, like full novelty factor, thought I was just like an absolute champion.
Yep.
Day 4 or 5, horrible because the novelty wears off.
Yes.
And I think, I don't know, like I had like a full, almost like energy crash before I leveled out. So like I just was so tired. And I feel like it was like the 20 odd years of keeping up the facade just came crashing down on me. So energetically I was super low. So I didn't have the energy to do things that I would normally do if I was feeling low, like go and exercise. So there was a few days where I was like, this is not fun anymore. My sugar cravings went through the roof. So then I got stressed out. I'm like, am I going to put on a ton of weight? Because all I feel like eating was like 1,000 Maxi Bonds all of the time. So there was like a little bit of, I didn't know how I felt for a few days. I felt really not shaky, but I just didn't feel great. And so that was within the first sort of 2 weeks. I had this huge high of like, I'm doing this thing and I am a superhero. I'm unstoppable, to like a complete, oh my God, what is this? This is awful. I don't even know what's going on right now. But what I did in that first month of not drinking is I wrote a journal every day. So I actually documented my feelings and my emotions, which I still do to this day. I do it on an app now though, but I wrote a physical journal of just what I was feeling, what I was thinking, how I was going. So some days I was like feeling super low and I was super cranky and all I wanted to do was have a freaking drink, but I wasn't drinking and I was really mad. So I would write about that in my diary, and I would like just express all of those feelings very raw and very real in that journal. And that was a really great, I realize now, tool on how to like process all the things that I was going through. and then the emotions. And then I just would start crying. Day 10, 11, and 12, I'm just hysterically crying all the time. I don't even know why. I'm like, what is going on? I'm a basket case. And it's because I think like the alcohol's out of my system and that big suppression of emotions had just started to dissipate a little bit. And I was like, oh, here are the feelings that I've been pushing down for 20 years. So they all started to kind of bubble up, but I was able to start processing some really big pain points in my life. That was great. It was a good, healthy thing. I'm like, oh, this is what I should have been doing with that pain instead of like pretending that it didn't exist. So it was very therapeutic, but it was a roller coaster for those first couple of weeks for sure.
Hi everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the show so far. This podcast is all about sharing real stories of resilience, recovery, and hope. Stories that remind us that we're not alone in this journey. If you'd like to support this work and help us reach more people, there are a few simple ways you can make a difference. Take a moment to like this episode, leave a comment, or share it with someone who you think might benefit from hearing it, whether it's a friend, family member, or somebody in your recovery community. Your support could touch the lives and inspire someone in their road to sobriety. Your stories are important. They remind us that we are not alone and help us all stay sober. What we're doing here creates a space where people can share their experiences, feel understood, and find inspiration to keep moving forward. By supporting the show, you're helping to amplify those voices and ensure that more people who need to find this message can. If you'd like to share your story and be interviewed, please email me at beyondsobrietyaa@gmail.com. Every journey is unique, and your experience could be exactly what someone needs to hear to find hope, strength, or inspiration. This podcast thrives on real stories from real people, and your voice has the power to make a difference in somebody's life. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to connect and discuss how your story can be a part of Beyond Sobriety. Thank you for your support. Together, we can continue to make a difference. Now, let's get back to the episode. Do you do much research into stopping drinking?
Not really. The only thing that I did was when I realized I really wanted to stop and I didn't know what to do, I called Beyond Blue. Actually, I was in had a bit of a moment and I was like, I think I need to call someone. So I called Beyond Blue, who are amazing.
Yeah.
And they suggested I go to a meeting. And so I got off the phone and I looked up AA, they just said meeting. And I was like, I'm assuming that means AA.
Yeah.
So I looked up AA. I Googled, am I an alcoholic? And I wasn't. So that was frustrating because I wanted to be an alcoholic because then it's like, then I'm a thing. Then I can give myself a label and I know if I'm an alcoholic, I can go to AA, I can get the help I need, and we can go on. But when I read the AA manifesto and I read like the definition of alcoholic, I was like, that actually isn't me. Like I can't honestly say that I relate to that definition. That doesn't feel like that is in alignment with where I'm at. I'm somewhere different. I'm not sober, but I'm not that. And I don't know where I am on this sliding scale. So because I read that manifesto, I was like, I don't know if the meeting's going to be the right thing. I don't know. And that's when I came up with the idea of, okay, well, I'll just go a month and see how I go. And if I need extra support, I can always call Beyond Blue. I'm going to tell my mum, I'm going to tell my boyfriend, and I'll keep it to a dull raw. I'm not going to tell anyone else, and I'll just see how I go. So I hadn't done any like research on what sort of those symptoms would be or how I would feel or what I didn't know what I was in for, and probably just as well, to be honest, because I took it at face value for what it is. And I was like, well, this is my experience. Today I feel good, or this is my experience. Today I feel like rubbish. But writing it down definitely helped me. And it helped me stop ruminating on, I just want to drink, a drink will fix something.
Yeah.
Because I had realized a while ago that drinking hadn't fixed anything. So we knew that that was a lie, but it was a lie that I was still really, it's like on high rotation in my head at that point.
Yeah, look, it definitely sounds like you're on your way somewhere and you got off the train or the bandwagon or whatever they want to call it before it got to a certain point. Because, I mean, like I'm definitely no expert on a lot of these things, but from my understanding, the definition that we use for alcoholic is when you start, you can't stop. And that's what I was like. I would have that one drink at 4 on the way home from work, and I would drink until I fell asleep that night. And if I was awake for a longer period of time, I was finding excuses to go down to the, I was a good husband. Oh, look, we're out of tomato sauce. Stop, I'll go get some. And I was going to the bottle-o.
Yeah.
I would leave the house sometimes 3-4 times a night just to go to the shops. Oh, the car needs petrol. God, the car doesn't need petrol. I was there filling up myself.
Get it in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But no,
Yeah.
I was, I'll go do this and I'll go and I'll get another bottle of wine. I'll get something cheap and nasty and whatever would get me through. When you said that you could, at 12, you're like, no, I've got to go home because then something bad would happen. You're able to remove yourself from that situation, which is
most of the time.
I
think as well, I was living by myself, and so I had no accountability to anyone other than myself. And so in a way that was a good thing because it meant, well, no one's coming to save me. So I lived, by myself for a while at that point. So I was like, well, there's no one to call if something happens. I don't have a partner. I'm by myself. I live alone. So it's up to me to make sure that I get home. So there was always a sense of I need to take care of myself as best I can, even though I'm completely inebriated right now. And I think also I didn't have to tell any lies to anyone that I lived with other than myself. Mm. So I would leave the house in the afternoon too. I just go for a bike ride and go via the bottle shop, but I just didn't have to pretend I was going to the shops to get tomato sauce.
Everything. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I didn't have to do that because I was by myself. And so maybe in a way I'd subconsciously created this life for myself where I didn't have to run it by anyone else. Mm. So it was easier for me.
Well,
maybe, I don't know. I've never really thought about that, but it was definitely easier in the sense that I wasn't in a relationship. It was just me. And so there wasn't that complexity I didn't need to hide anything from anyone because it was just me at home.
Yeah. I worry or I think back if I didn't have my family at that point, how low would I have gone? Mm. Because they were really keeping the leash on.
Right.
So I had to try and hide it. And did you ever have to lie about your drinking or do anything to hide it or no?
Not really. I lied to myself for most of my adult life, I guess, in a way, because I convinced myself that I enjoyed drinking. And I don't actually think I did until that day that I was like, I don't want to do this anymore because I don't actually find this fun anymore. So not really, other than to myself, no. When I told my mum, she was living in a different state. We'd not lived in the same house for many, many years by then because I was a full-grown adult.
Well, good. You're meant to leave home.
Yeah, exactly. And she was shocked. She was like, what do you mean you think you've got a drinking problem? I was like, yeah, I think I drink a bit too much. She goes, you mean a bit too much? How much are you drinking? And I was like, I drink every day. And she's like, you drink every day? I'm like, yeah. She goes, I didn't know that. I'm like, well, of course you didn't. So she was shocked. My boyfriend at the time was living in Sydney and I was in Melbourne. And we were we just started dating. And so he wasn't there half the time. And then when he did come, we'd go out and drink because it was, first part of a relationship and he'd come to visit and it was all fun. But I told him and he was just like, what do you need? And I was like, well, that's a great response. You can stay. Yeah. I said, I just need us to not go out drinking for a while. And he's like, that's cool. We can do other stuff. What do you want to do? Go and get ice cream? Do you want to go stand up paddleboarding? Do you want to, he was great.
Yeah.
And and they're the only two people I told. Yeah, I don't think other than to myself that I really lied.
What's one of the high points in your sobriety?
Oh my God. There's 1,000. It's been 10 years or 10 years of high points.
I suppose it's like the exact opposite to the low points. You could dig out the rock bottom and go lower.
Yeah.
But then there's always
there's the high point and then you can just get better than that.
Yeah.
I'll go back to the first year because that's quite a huge year in my story.
Mm.
At the beginning of that year, I'd started a new job in radio and someone had asked, and it's my quote unquote dream. I've already had my dream job. I've already had my dream job on TV at MTV. I already got my dream radio show, which was the National Drive show. And then I got my second dream radio show, which was the Sydney Breakfast show. So I've had 3 dream jobs. So I'm very lucky.
Yeah.
/ work my ass off. I got this second dream radio job and Sydney Breakfast, just such an amazing opportunity. And that coincided with the year I gave up drinking. So I started this really big radio job and I stopped drinking at the same time. And then I started working out a lot and that was kind of a lot of the time that my mates were out at the pub drinking, I was at the gym hanging out, working out and feeling good. And that's kind of how the first sort of 6 months of that year went. And I remember one of the girls on my team said to me, is there anything, this is 3 months in to me not drinking, which was a shock to like, I think the entire radio industry that Maz Compton had stopped drinking. And she said, is there anything that like, how long are you going to do this for? And I was like, I don't know. I just really love it. I'm going to keep going. She goes, is there anything right now that could happen that would make you start drinking again? I was like, if I lost my job, because that would be the worst thing that I could possibly. I've worked for 7 years to get this job. I've just moved cities. This is the pinnacle of my career. This is like the best of the best of the best. Like no one gets these jobs. I've got it. And like, I want to keep it forever. I never want to leave this job. It's the greatest thing I've ever got. And so if someone took that away from me, I would absolutely go and start drinking again. And you will not believe this, but on the 6th of October that year, I lost that job. Not through anything that I had done. It was just a new CEO had come in and decided that he didn't like this show and he'd signed someone else. And so he got rid of our show and he put in a new breakfast show. And that day I thought, I remember saying this like 6 months ago, that if I lost this job, it would be the only thing that would drive me to drink because it would be so devastating. And I was so devastated that I did not drink. I went home and I was sad and I was angry. And then I was like, well, drinking's not going to, it's not going to get me my job back.
Yeah.
So like if I had a drink right then on that day, it would not have changed anything that had transpired that day at all. So I didn't have a drink. And then I just kind of got through that. So to go through 10 months of sobriety and then to have like what at the time I thought was the most devastating thing to happen in my entire career happen. And then to get through that, I was like, wow, there's some growth. Like I've got some tools now other than drinking. Like I know how to deal with public humiliation. I am coping with grief. I'm coping with disappointment. I'm dealing with failure. Like all of these things were going on for me and I managed to handle them with grace and style instead of alcohol. And that's kind of when I was like, I think this is a really good thing for me. I will keep going.
That's outstanding. I love that because for so many years, alcohol was the solution.
Yeah, it's the problem.
Yeah, until it's not the solution anymore. And then you think, oh, this will cause me to go back to that. But then you realize, no, it's not going to affect anything. It's not going to change anything.
No, it's going to make it worse, actually.
Yeah. I did read this in your book when you did say that you finished out the year and at the final part of the year, you told all your listeners, look, this is going to be our last episode and somebody else is taking over. And to be able to do that, I think it's not how you start, it's how you end. It's really the end, which is the more important thing because there's people out there who don't end well.
No. And I think also like my dad actually told me like more people remember how you leave a room than how you enter a room.
Yes.
Dan and I, purposely did that. Like we didn't do this whole farewell campaign for 6 weeks. We were still on air for like, I think 8 weeks after they told us we'd be wrapped up at the end of the year. But I am so glad we did that because then 4 years later, the same company re-employed me.
Yeah.
And here I am now hosting Triple M, doing the breakfast show 20 minutes from home where I'm raising my family, which again is a bit of a dream job. And I knew, even though it was hard to accept, I knew that decision wasn't about me personally.
Yeah.
Even though with jobs it can feel personal. It's not. That was a decision made by an executive who doesn't even work at this company anymore. That was just the card I got dealt. I handled it the way I handled it because I wasn't drinking.
Yeah.
And so that is like sobriety is the winner in that story. And then, I left media for a few years. I had a family. We moved to the Central Coast. Then they welcomed me back into the building with open arms and they're like, do you want another radio job? I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. Well, here you go. And here I am. And so you just never know what's around the corner either, right? Like you don't know, like a door closing might not fully be closing or one closes and like 10 others open. And so I'm just always conscious of that you just, even though in the moment it felt like the worst thing ever, I look back now and it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, which is weird to say about losing a job. But I think about how I've grown from that moment and all the other things I did outside of radio after that moment have made me a way, way better person.
Yeah. Now, what an absolute blessing. Did you find that you had to rebuild any relationships with anybody after you stopped drinking?
No. If anything, like my friendship circle got a lot tighter.
Yep.
And that's just, I think, it quite naturally some relationships fizzled out. And again, when I left radio, like a lot of those relationships that, you know, the glue in the relationships with radio and alcohol, and I wasn't drinking and I wasn't working in radio anymore. So it's like we've got nothing to, we don't need to keep hanging out. And I was fine to let those relationships fizzle out, you know, I never rang anyone and said, I don't want to be friends with you anymore. Like things just naturally came to an end with a lot of relationships.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And then like my really good ride or dies, we're all still there. They're great. And I had to, you know, kind of just reassess how we would hang out. So a lot of my friends drink occasionally still, but not with me. So we go and we have brunch, or we go and hire barbecue boats, and, you know, like we just go and do cool stuff that it would be weird if someone was bringing alcohol along to a kayaking adventure. You know, it's like we don't need the beers in the backpack. So I just kind of reimagined those relationships and day parts, and that really helped as well. And if anything, it made my life simpler because I didn't have to keep hanging out with people that I kind of didn't want to hang out with anymore.
Fair enough.
If I'm being honest.
Drunk people are the worst though. That's what I find.
But they think they're the funniest, and it's just, I know. But look, hey, I used to be one of them, so no judgment.
No, absolutely. No judgment here. I've done worse than any of it. What tools do you use to help maintain your sobriety?
That's a really interesting question because I don't feel like it needs maintaining. Like I just am sober. I just will never drink. Like it's just, I just won't. But I think what I've learned is I've learned a bit of emotional intelligence. I've learned how to name feelings and how to unpack feelings. I've learned how to process things when they happen. I'm a very verbal processor. So I have a therapist that I see very regularly to like talk through what's going on in work, in my marriage, with my kid, with family or whatever. So they're the sort of things that I guess I just live with now. And I don't think that's to like stop me from ever drinking again. That is just to make me the best version of myself.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because I think I have a different view on, like, I don't even feel like I'm sober now. I just am. And I just don't drink, right? But
it really should be the way it is, isn't it? But you've got to define it because of our culture.
Yes, that is true. I just think I am who I am. I happen to not drink alcohol. And I happen to be able to manage my stressors better than what I have in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the therapy definitely, the writing definitely.
Journal keeping, yeah.
Journal keeping is a huge one. And probably exercise would be the other thing that I think just helps me feel good mentally every day. So I go to the gym or I do like a walk, whether I walk my dog or my kid or whatever, that keeps me feeling mentally good as well. So I sort of try and incorporate one or a couple of those things every day to keep me in a good, healthy space.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned journaling because it's one of my New Year's resolutions to start doing like a small journal or keeping something. And I couldn't find one that I liked. So I actually developed my own one, which I've got on my little tablet here, which I write my stuff down. But I always find that I'm much more productive when I start my day by doing that.
Yeah.
Because I just have 3 goals. I go, look, what do I want to achieve by, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock tonight? And I just write that down. And then at 4 o'clock, I'm there going, wait, I haven't done this yet. And I go, well, I kind of promised myself I'd do it. And then you kind of have to do it. So it's good.
Oh, that's good. Another thing I think if some people like journaling, so boring, is just to do like not a to-do list of like, because I think for some people, like, so for me, for example, like the idea of adding more things on a list for me to do in a day is silly because I'm already like at max capacity with my output and how much I can handle in my life because it's a busy life. So another thing on a list for me is like too many things, but a gratitude journal is really great because it's just saying what you're thankful for. And so that's a nice way to, instead of like adding things on, is actually just a way of going, oh, this is what I'm actually thankful for. And then you kind of wake up in the morning going, okay, what am I thankful for today? And it'll change every day. And it's
Change
just
your perspective, doesn't it?
It's a really nice way to start the day. And if you wake up and you're like, I'm not thankful for anything, then just sit with that for a second and go, well, you know what? I woke up today.
Yes.
So let's be thankful for that, because some people won't, you know, and I love that. I do try and keep a sense of gratitude often. And we have, you know, I grew up in a religious house where we used to say grace before dinner.
Yes.
But not so much religious anymore. Just, you know, have a faith system. And we do what are you grateful for around the table before we eat or while we're having dinner. So just one thing that you're grateful for. And we do this with our 5-year-old. And some days he's like, I'm not grateful for anything because you're making me eat carrots. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. But can we try and think of one thing that happened today, you know? And it's nice to be able to pass that on to him and to instill that in him in a young age, that there is so much to be grateful for if you look for it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I like what you said in your book where you mentioned, I'm not sure if it was you who said it or you're quoting somebody else, about saying we can walk into a bottle-o and buy enough alcohol to kill ourselves.
Yeah, that was my friend Osher Ginsberg who spoke about that. He's very passionate about that.
Yeah, I just, that blew my mind. I thought, yeah, you can. And why are we okay with that as a society?
Yeah, we shouldn't be.
No.
Well, I'm not.
No.
But it is a poison. It's a carcinogen, like it's cancer causing. It's A1. The World Health Organization has said any amount of alcohol ingested by a human will increase your chances of getting cancer. So if I sat here and you had a glass of water and a glass of alcohol and I said to you, hey, you can have this water and that will not increase your chances of 11 different types of cancer, or you could have this beer and it will increase your chances of getting cancer, of 11 types of cancer, by up to X amount percent. Which drink would you have?
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's the choice everyone makes every single day when they drink alcohol. They just don't actually know that is what they're choosing.
Yeah.
And that, I think, that's a big alcohol company problem. It's a government problem. It's like, that's, you know, almost bigger than this conversation. But I think that the alcohol industry is going to have a reckoning, and it's coming, just like the tobacco industry did. I think there needs to be labeling. I think companies need to be called out for marketing alcohol, especially to women, with pink washing everything. Because the other thing that happens for women is once you kind of hit your 40s is we have a huge decline in a hormone that can help process the alcohol in our bodies. Okay. And so I know so many women who get to 40 and they're like, my hangovers just got like, they're 3-day hangovers now. I'm like, yeah, that's because you've had a huge drop off on this hormone that men still have steady in their 40s, 50s and 60s and beyond. And so for women, the amount of chaos that alcohol causes as a hormone disruptor is like, it's ridiculous. Like, no woman should be drinking alcohol, period, like at all. And like men, sure, but for women especially, it is like the worst. It's the absolute worst thing that you can put in your body. But people don't know that. Or do they know that? And we just pretend that it's okay because we're not hurting anyone. I don't know which it is. But I want there to be more conversations that really talk about like how detrimental and how dangerous it is for our internal bodies and brains.
I definitely agree with there should be more conversations. There's no doubt about that. And there definitely should be an awareness on, or at least a public education system about that. Because, you know, I didn't know this until I started reading these books. I read a book from somebody in the UK. I think it was called Why I Kissed Drinking Goodbye. And she went into a lot of that stuff that you go into in your book about the World Health Organization. And the Minister for Health in the UK actually labelled alcohol as saying, look, it is just as bad as drugs. It should be labelled as the same thing as drugs. And 2-3 months later, he lost his job because of it. I guess we're getting into different podcasts for conspiracy theories.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
And just the way, the cultural aspect. My son, I mentioned this in my last episode, and I said my son, he does cadets. He's 14 years old, and we went to his end of year parade last year, and what the cadet I guess, organisation do is that when they're graduating and they're no longer cadets anymore, they get them like an engraved beer mug for them that they're passing out. Now they're older than 18. They made a disclaimer saying, "Oh, these cadets are now older than 18." So all this. But my question was, why beer mug?
Yeah.
Like, and I was there going, I was close, and I haven't done it, but I was close to writing the email, going, look, do we really think it's appropriate to ingrain this into our children? Because really, you guys are an organisation dedicated to children. Why are you doing this? Even if they're not children at that time, they're looking forward to that, and I don't want to be that guy.
No, be that guy. There needs to be more of that guy, because otherwise we're never going to see change. Like, we have to speak up and we have to call people out. And it's just, and no one wants to be that guy. But unfortunately, like, we just really have to be vocal, and I would encourage you to say something. And like, when we're calling people out, there's a way to do it that's respectful, where you're not just being an asshole and going, I don't agree with this because A, B, and C. But you can offer another solution. So, and this is what I try to do whenever I have to have a confrontation with somebody, is I'll always offer a way out or a solution or an alternative.
Of course, yes.
So it's like, hey guys, the whole beer mug thing, like, let's talk about that. Do you think maybe we could offer them something else instead of that to work towards? Like, why don't we, whatever, I don't know, whatever it is, like, maybe.
Yeah, like a cadet shield, or,
Yeah, like maybe a bow and arrow is not the right thing, but like something. I was thinking
of a gun, but I thought that might not be good
Not
either.
a gun, and not a weapon, but something that is going to be as valuable, but is also going to instill in them something that isn't connected to alcohol. Why don't we try and instill that into our young people? Why don't we do that? Like, there's a way to do it where you can get people on side so easily and give them an alternative without them thinking that you're just shutting down their ideas.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I encourage you to go have that conversation.
See what we do. What advice would you give to anybody thinking about cutting back, or who thinks that they might have a problem with alcohol?
I would just say, even if you don't think you have a problem with alcohol, give yourself a break from it. So I talk about this in my book, where I'm like, ask yourself the question, am I okay with my relationship with alcohol? And if you honestly say, no, I'm not okay with it, whatever that means to you, then definitely give yourself a season out of drinking to see what it's like on the other side. But if you ask yourself the question, am I okay with my relationship with alcohol? And you go, yes, the challenge is to give yourself a break anyway.
Yeah.
And see what's on the other side of you not drinking that could be a better version of you without booze. Because I honestly think it is a zero benefit product.
Yeah.
There's not one benefit, but we somehow convince ourselves that there are benefits, and we believe all of the lies that it tells us. So my challenge would be to anyone, whether you drink every day, every weekend, once a month, once a year, whatever, give yourself a break from it and see what is on the other side of it. And you might love that person a bit more, which would be nice.
But look, thank you so much.
That's fine.
You've been so generous with your time, and I really appreciate it.
You're more than welcome. I love talking about this. And if anyone has a question or wants to know anything, whatever, you can always DM me on Instagram. I'm at Maz Compton. I'm always willing to share my story and help anyone who wants the help, because it's there.
You're amazing. Thank you so much. I can honestly say that I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Maz. She's an excellent person, vibrant and full of life, and clearly has a fantastic life now, due largely to the fact that she's decided to quit drinking. I have to admit there were times that I struggled to relate to her, as we all have different drinking stories, and it's clear that she got off the drinking bandwagon well before myself. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about us raising the bottom. What this means is that not everybody has to lose everything in their life before they turn to a life of sobriety. Clearly Maz was smarter than me and got off that bandwagon a lot earlier than I did, and for that I applaud her. I genuinely recommend her book, Last Drinks by Maz Compton. It's one of the better ones that I've read about quitting drinking, and she also hosts a podcast show of the same name. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you for joining us today on Beyond Sobriety. Just before we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a gentle reminder. Let's create a safe space where individuals can feel empowered to share their experience without fear of judgment or disclosure. And if you found today's episode helpful or inspiring, I encourage you to share Beyond Sobriety with somebody who might benefit from it. Together, we can spread awareness, support, and hope to those still struggling with alcohol addiction. Remember, your feedback is invaluable to us. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, or stories you'd like to share, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at beyondsobrietyaa@gmail.com. Thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, stay strong, stay sober, and remember, you're not alone in this journey. I'm Michael, and I'm an alcoholic.